So welcome to the Book Me Help channel. Today we're going to be interviewing a experienced behavioral change coach. Somebody that has got the skills and methods in order to help people with career shifts, overcoming various problems, challenges, issues that we face in the everyday world. So we're going to speak to Fedrick William, a behavioral change coach with more than 20 years of experience, and is also the International Coaching Federation certified as well. And we're going to delve into what are some of the problems, what are some of the challenges people come to a coach in order to find guidance. So Fedrick, great to meet you today. How are you going?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me here, Lars.
So it's best to start these interviews by asking what makes you a coach?
So I was introduced to coaching as a skill set in my first job. And this was back in 2008, 2009. This was my first job out of the university. I graduated in mathematics and computer science. And the entire organization was going through a shift, a cultural shift. And the role that I had at that time, Lars, was called as a quality coach. Basically, I was listening into customer service agents talking to customers in the UK. And what was expected out of me was to listen to the calls. And since I was a subject matter expert at that specific field, at that specific point in time, to give feedback or to make the experience of our customers better. And the organization had decided that, okay, feedback doesn't work. We need to move to coaching. And fortunately, ICF was the organization, and one of its partners was selected as the organization which was taking us through this large cultural organization shift. And that's basically where the story started. And years after I completed my master's, I pivoted my career towards engineering, data analytics, and building products with financial technology companies. I realized that this way of leadership has somehow become a core value or a core skill of mine because of that early experience that I had in my first job. And it just became my default mode to go to when I needed to have personal or professional development conversations or any kind of performance conversations, or for that matter, any kind of conversations at work, not only with my directs, but also with people who I work with. Um, and yeah, that was the beginning, I would say. And that's how it became an internalized part of me.
Frederick, you've been an experienced coach over the last 2 decades. What I'm wondering is what are things people are struggling with now that they weren't struggling with 20 years ago?
People are struggling with more or less the same things now than what they were struggling with 20 years ago, and that thing is change. It's just that the pace of that change has become much, much, much faster today than 20 years ago.
Excellent. So now we're talking about change and people being able to make changes. What happens to somebody if they're faced with a situation that they can either change or stay in the same routines? What happens to somebody if they just don't change, in your experience?
A lot of things happen. So first thing that generally happens when there is this internal drive of not to change, to be as they are, there is a lot of dissonance between what they want to do and what they're experiencing within themselves. And what I've seen in my experience is that leads to burnouts, that leads to sleeplessness, that leads to trying different things to achieve one's goal, but not getting there. Focusing on too many things at one time and doing none of those well. Trying and trying again to achieve certain goals, either personal or professional, and failing again and again. Uh, yeah, these are some things that come top of mind when you ask that question.
So, what do most people misunderstand about coaching?
To answer this one, I need to get a little bit into the history of this term coaching, right? So, professional coaching as such came into um, the professional world somewhere in the late 80s to early 90s. Before that, there were different kind of coaches, especially football coaches, sport coaches, or acting coaches. There are different kinds of coaches. And that definition of coaching somehow has stuck in people's mind. And the biggest misunderstanding that people have of a professional coach is that this person is going to give me solutions, a pre-baked solution. I will go to them with some of my problems and they will exactly tell me the steps that needs to be taken by me or by the client in this case, so that I'm able to reach my goal. And I think that's the biggest, if you ask me, the biggest misunderstanding that people have about coaching.
How would you describe coaching to a client that needed help? How would you describe the process? How would you describe it so the normal person could understand what coaching actually is?
Coaching is a process by which they gain deeper awareness about themselves, their strengths, their patterns, their values, and they use all of these deeper awarenesses that they've had about themselves to reach their goal. And my role as a coach is to create that awareness consistently, to be able to be a caring as well as a daring person, that they are able to reach that goal even without me. My job is to make Fedrick as a coach not necessary at the end of the journey in their lives. So that's basically how I describe coaching for them.
What I find interesting is that coaching has increased quite a lot in popularity, and popularity is a question of also supply and demand. Do you think that people are more aware, self-aware these days, or do you think that there are more people that are just lost these days than there were before?
That's a very interesting question. I think access to a lot of psychometric tests, a lot of psychological tests has become very commonplace. The number of times I've been surprised that one of my client already knows the test I'm going to give them before the start of our coaching engagement, or in the first or second session of our coaching engagement, have increased in general, right? And normally I ask them, hey, how do you know this? They come back to me and say, oh, we saw this on Instagram, we saw this on TikTok, or we saw it online somewhere. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's interesting. So definitely the awareness of the psychometric tests that usually go with a lot of coaching sessions has increased. But does that quantity increase define that the quality has improved? I think no. Because the next question when I ask them, hey, what did you do with them? Did you take these tests? They say yes. Then what did you do? We don't remember. That goes to prove that there is awareness. However, awareness doesn't mean action. It doesn't mean impact. It doesn't mean change. And in general, I think that awareness has increased. However, people, I feel, are a lot more lost than before because of the amount of stuff that is being hit on them, be it through social media or be it through television or be it through other mediums. There's a lot. So everything is craving for your attention, right? Like, who's the new product? Your attention is the new product. My attention is the product that is being sold at all times. However, at the same time, there is lack of action in the right direction, which leads to this feeling of being lost, is how I see it.
Interesting. Tell me about a moment that you had with a client. If you can, just keep anonymity as much as you can, but just of a moment where a client realized, an example of where a client just realized themselves or had a feeling of just arriving to this light bulb moment.
Yeah, yeah. So there are a lot of examples that popped up in my head, but this one specifically sticks in my head, always when someone asks me this question. So this was a client who's 20 or 25 years more elder to me, more experienced than me. And I was coaching them for a long-term coaching engagement, about 12 sessions. Normally, it's 8 to 12 is normal. And this was 12 sessions. And I think this was somewhere towards the middle of the session, or middle of the 12 session. It was sixth or seventh session when they just went quiet completely. And they were working more towards executive presence, leadership skills of how to think strategically, how to be able to show up in meetings as a leader and not as an individual contributor. These kind of questions that they were working on, right? And they just paused. And as a coach, I'm just waiting, waiting for what's going to be next. And they said something that sticks with me forever after that. They said, Fedrick, in my more than 40 or 35, 40 years of experience that I have, this is the first time I am being myself in a professional context. And I feel light. I feel challenged, but light. And this has never happened to me before in a professional context. And for me as a coach, as an experienced coach, that moment was crazy, really crazy. That's the word that comes in. Imagine 35, 40 years working at different jobs and someone saying this is the first time they're being able to be themselves, be in sync with their values, be in sync with their strengths and not being judged.
Mm.
And that for me, there was the power of coaching being displayed once again for me. So yeah, that sticks with me.
This is on a side note. You've coached a lot of leaders, and also internally when you started, and then obviously with your private clients. Could you give me 4 or 5 traits
Mm.
or qualities you think a good leader should possess or possesses?
So there are many, but if I have to drop it down to the top 5, the first one that comes to mind is empathy. And empathy means different things to different people. But what I mean by empathy here is someone who is listening, and listening just not to say the next few words or listening not to respond, but to really understand what's happening there, right? Um, Something else is resilience, and resilience is a very popular word today. But what I mean here by resilience is being able to think about things both from a long-term, medium-term, and short-term perspective, and treating things for what they are rather than how they would like it to be, right? Not treating everything as the village is burning and now we need to do something about it, right? But really taking things for what they are and being resilient, not only with me or with their team, but also with their management teams, right? Um, Something else that comes to mind is that they are very aware. They invest time in sharpening the saw. What I mean by that is they invest time in training, development, doing things other than work to know themselves better. And everyone has different ways to know themselves better. I'm not saying coaching is like the one and only way to know it, right? Some do walks, long walks, some do retreats, some basically spend a lot of time with their family, but they are aware about who they are. Um, they think of change as a process and not as a destination. And because of that, they know that you created something today, but this is good enough for today. And tomorrow we'll have to redo this. And they do this without this sense of impending sense of danger and pressure, if you know what I mean, right? Like so everything is work in progress up until the next iteration is built. But they do this very consciously, right? So they have that embracing change mindset. Something else that comes to mind is when you leave them, when I say when you leave them, when I've gone to these leaders, both as a coach or even as a person who's being led by these leaders, and you go to them with some kind of work that you want to show, and let's imagine I've done a really bad job at it, right? Or not a great job at it. I would come out with a sense of, with a lot of constructive feedback. They're really good at giving constructive feedback. They won't make their directs, or me in that case as a direct, feel like I don't know anything. They're really good at looking at what worked and what could work better and giving that constructive feedback. So these are some things that come to mind.
Imposter syndrome. Okay, imposter syndrome. It gets thrown around in social media these days, left, right, and center. It's everybody's talking about imposter syndrome also as a coaching topic. But what actually is it?
When someone is not in sync with their values externally and internally, that is imposter syndrome. When they believe one thing, but they're acting in a totally different way. And that consistently makes the person judge themselves, compare themselves with others, and not and doesn't allow them to be at peace, irrespective if they are doing some work or just relaxing, right? That for me is imposter syndrome, because I've seen that with a lot of my clients. It's, again, to summarize, when their internal values are not in sync with the external actions consistently, and I'm saying consistently because it's highly, very, very tough for this to be in sync all the time, right? But when it's consistently not in sync, it reaches a stage where it's imposter. You feel like an imposter. It's not even a syndrome. You feel like an imposter.
How is it that successful people can suffer from imposter syndrome and still be successful?
It goes back to how do they define success, right? And after a few iterations of being successful, after a few definitions of success, that definition sticks with them. That's the only definition of success for them. And when they do not meet success in that way, they think they're unsuccessful. They don't realize, a lot of them don't realize that the same definition of success doesn't work in all situations. They don't ask themselves the question, what does success look like for this? They don't pause, they don't reflect. And with that same definition of success that continues year after year, decade after decade, they begin at a certain point in time to always seek external success metric validation, something that comes from the outside, right? Not saying that's not important. We are running a business. We need to see that these metrics, the work that you do, gets translated into external metrics. However, when this becomes so broad that all the time you're just seeking something which is external, an external metric, and are not ready to look within for some signs of internal metrics, that makes even the most successful of people feel like an imposter, because they are judging something that they're facing today or that they're trying to solve today with the success metrics of yesterday. And that doesn't work.
So in your experience, Fedrick, with coaching, with spirituality coaching and all the different modalities that you do, you spoke about imposter syndrome being a misalignment of values and success, the idea of success. But in your eyes, when you've got a client in front of you that is clearly misaligned, maybe with their values and misaligned in what they perceive as success. What version of success do you take them to?
This goes to the core of coaching and core of coaching competencies, right? So the version of success or the success metric that my client would experience at the end of coaching, there is no single version. In fact, I say this a lot of times that no two coaching clients, the experience that they go through is exactly the same. No two coaching sessions with the same client is the same. And that's the beauty of the tool that we have in our hands, coaching, right? So going back again to the question, what version of success do I guide my clients to? I don't guide them at all. And that's where the paradox lies. How can I not guide them? We arrive at the success metrics for each client, or I arrive at the success metric for each client at the beginning of a coaching agreement because they come with a problem. Everyone, nobody is buying coaching, or nobody is saying, "Oh, I want to be coached, Fedrick." Somebody is saying, "Hey, I want to move countries. How can I do that?" Somebody is saying, I want to get promoted. How do I do that? Somebody is saying, "I want better work-life balance. How do I do that?" Right? So everyone's coming with a problem. Nobody wants to be coached. Now, based on the problem, we define what success looks like, along with me, of course, but this what success looks like, the metric, be it quantitative or qualitative, needs to be defined by the client. And this gets documented in the coaching journal that this is what you think as of today that success looks like. And again, that's not set in stone. It might happen 3 sessions later that they realize something about themselves. They become self-aware a little bit more. They become, they journal, they understand themselves a bit more, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, what I defined 3 sessions ago, I don't think so. That's what success looks like. Success looks like something else for me right now." And we change that success metric for the client with the client's permission. The client is at the center of their change, not me. Like I said earlier, right? At the end of 12 sessions, they should not need Fedrick as a coach in their lives. They might need me for something else later, which is fine. But at the end of 12 sessions, they should be creative, resourceful, whole, and independent in achieving their goals. And there are times when it happens that even in the 11th of the 12th session, the success metric changes, which is fine till the time it is in sync with what the client wants to do. So there is, again, to summarize, there's no single version of success ever. There are different versions. They also change during the entire coaching agreement, but making sure that the client achieves their goals in their way and consistently.
So what's a part of yourself that you had to confront through your coaching training or your coaching journey?
There are so many, Lars. Like I can probably write a book about it. Maybe I should at some point. But something that comes top of mind is, so I'm a solutionist, right? My education is in mathematics, computer science, physics, finance, and I have built things. Basically, there's a problem, find a solution, right? The fixer mindset, right? And when I began coaching professionally, when I say professionally, like taking on clients externally, that's the mindset that I had to change for myself that, hey, I'm not the fixer anymore. I'm the enabler. And that mindset shift took a very long time for me because with the fixer mindset, what I would be doing is somebody comes with a problem. I would guide them, direct them to a solution immediately without going deep into who the client is. What's the story beneath the story that the client is not telling me, right? But with a enabler mindset, I liberate myself and the client at the same time. What do I mean by liberate myself? I'm not under the pressure to for the client or to get the client to a solution that I think would be the best one. It might be the best one. I'm not saying it might not be, but I'm not pressured to do that. But I allow that space or that silence and the awareness to build into the client that they're able to reach various solutions, not only at the surface level, but also at the subconscious level. And that was a huge mindset shift change for me to move from fixer mindset to an enabler mindset.
So you also do spirituality coaching. So what makes somebody come to you in that space?
So to begin with, I would like to say that let's not confuse spirituality with religion, because a lot of people, even today, confuse spirituality with religion. What makes people come to me for spirituality coaching is because, firstly, I'm a very spiritual person. I think about questions and I write about questions like what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose? Why do we do some things in a certain way? And when people generally read it, they connect with it and they're like, yeah, I have these same questions too. Why am I doing exactly the same thing? I have all the money in the world right now. I have achieved all the goals, but why do I still keep doing exactly the same things? And they feel the sense of void within them, even when they have all the material wealth that they could possibly accomplish in one lifetime, and sometimes even more. And they continue on that path, feeling that void within them. And that's when they come to me to not find their spiritual path, but to figure out why this void. And the realization that what got them here won't get them to the next step is what they're looking for, but they don't know it as yet. So they come to me with a specific goal in mind, with the void, but the coaching journey leads them to exactly where they have to be in that point in their life, and which is not predetermined ever, cannot be predetermined.
Is there one question that you ever ask the clients that you think have changed their life?
I would say there are some questions that makes a client pause, and I love those moments when they pause and they're like, wow, I never really thought about this question before. That's an amazing question. And something that comes to mind is, what's the cost of not doing this? And when they start considering, okay, what happens if I don't do this? Or a question like, imagine if there was no fear, there was zero fear. What would you do next? Or something like, what happens when you don't care about what the world thinks about this?
You've led big teams and now you're coaching leaders. How has leadership changed over the last couple of decades in your minds?
Leadership has become, or should definitely become, but has definitely become a lot less authoritative. It gives agency to people, irrespective if they are in leadership positions or non-leadership positions. If you are an intern, you have 10, 20, 30, 40 years experience, irrespective, right? And leadership has changed in a way where the leader is expected by design to be a servant leader and not as an authoritative leader, the know-it-all, right? And this has also happened because at the pace at which things are developing, let's just take the last 3 years since LLMs have been introduced into our lives, right? What's the price or value of knowledge anymore? Anyone and anything, anyone can learn anything so much faster than before if they put their minds to it, right? You have like the entire knowledge right there now, even much more easily available. And earlier leaders would come up with saying, or the idea of a leader would be, this person has to be the subject matter expert, the know-it-all, the person who knows everything about how to solve this. While that is still of value, but that's not the biggest thing of value anymore. The biggest thing of value is how can they enable their teams to be their best possible version? How can they enable their teams to do their jobs to the best of their capability? And that is a very different skill set as compared to what was even required 5 years ago, I would say, not even 20. That's how leadership is evolving today.
What a manager, let's call them a manager, a leader, however you want to describe it, somebody with responsibilities. How should they be leading? How should those leaders be leading today that they're not?
In reality, right, you need to be very agile and show different kinds of leadership in different situations, right? There are situations where you have to take tough decisions. You have to let go of people because they are not performing or the company is not doing well or for so many different economical reasons. You have to be kind, but at the same time, extremely assertive and extremely clear with the decisions that are being made. There are times when you're presenting to senior stakeholders where you're again being a leader and you have to have different set of leadership muscles being used in those at that point in time. So there is no single type of leadership. I think each person comes with, like I said earlier, some strengths, some values, and certain behaviors that they can display much easily. But also leadership can be trained. Not everyone is a born leader. Not everyone is so agile that they're able to change the way they lead in different situations. And yeah, so to summarize, going back to your question, it depends. No two organizations are the same. No two teams within the same organization are the same. So it's very situational. But what comes up for most leaders who are effective are that they're aware and agile. And first aware and then agile, not agile and aware. Because when they're aware, they know what type of leadership to use at what point in time.
If someone listening feels stuck, or feels, you use the analogy of masks, what's the first thing they should do?
I would first congratulate them. I would say, that's great. You've reached this point now. Get to the bottom of it. Why are you stuck? What's making you stuck? Be it journaling, be it a really deep meditation, thinking, speaking to a friend, getting a mentor, getting a coach if that's exactly what they need, is great next steps when they feel stuck. Because the person, if they're listening now, I want to tell them that you're not alone. Everyone feels stuck. Even if you are 40 years experienced or 0 years experienced, everyone feels stuck, right? And you don't have to do it alone. You really don't have to do it alone. There is help, professional services, help available there today more than ever that can help you uncover the next best possible version. And you don't have to do it alone. So feeling stuck, congratulations, you're on the right track.
What's one truth that you would like to leave behind in this world?
The same lessons come to you in life at different points in life till the time you have learned that lesson, and then the next lesson comes. And till the time you don't learn that lesson keeps presenting itself to you in different shapes and forms and with different people, with different situations. But you have to learn that lesson to go to the next one. The truth that I have realized is, and that I would like to leave behind, is this: embrace change, because everything changes sooner or later. Yourself, relationships, the world of work, the economy, your husband, your wife, your partner, your friends, everything changes. Embrace change. That's what I would like to leave behind.
We've got a tradition in this podcast, in closing, and that is for you to leave the audience with one tip, advice, personal practice that you would recommend for anyone to do right now to get them out of a rut. What is your personal practice?
Write, journal. The reason why I say that is writing is therapy. You don't know it as yet, but once you start doing it, you realize the therapeutic effects of writing. Write, journal. every day, even if it's of 5 minutes. Maybe if you don't know what you want to write about, just take a pen, don't write on the computer. There are too many distractions. Just take a book, just take a pen and write. Make it a habit.
What's one thing that everybody should understand about coaching?
Everyone should understand the fact that coaching is a process that uncovers who you really are so that you can reach your goal in a sustainable and consistent manner. That is coaching.
What's one mindset shift that changes everything?
Not looking for perfectionism in everything, because there is no perfectionism. There is something that is perfect at this moment in time, and this will not be perfect tomorrow or in the next moment. So move forward. Don't look for perfectionism, because in the pursuit of perfectionism, we lose out a lot of our energies that we can use elsewhere.
What's the one habit that makes the biggest difference?
There are 2 or 3 habits that come to mind, but the biggest difference is journaling every day, meditating every day, and having a great night's sleep. I mean, great, not good, great night sleep.
What's the cost of staying stuck?
The pain of regret, that's the cost of staying stuck.
What's the biggest lie we tell ourselves when we are stuck?
That I am not enough. I am alone in this feeling. Nobody understands me. Nobody can help me. And this is a situation only that I am going through.
So, what's one habit people can use to destroy insecurity or build self-confidence?
Being aware of the constant comparisons all of us make with our neighbors, friends, near and dear ones, people we know, people we do not know, and especially comparing what we see or what we notice without knowing what success looks like for them.
What do most people get wrong about success?
They do not try to redefine or reflect on the various possible definitions of success that might matter to themselves more than someone else's definition. In fact, most people, what they get wrong about success is that they define their own success metric by someone else's definition and not their own definition. And then they're living someone else's lives constantly rather than living their own life.
So why do so many people chase clarity but avoid making decisions?
Simply because it's uncomfortable. Because as soon as someone gets clarity and awareness is the first step, right? It's not the end. You get the clarity, you realize, I need to make changes. I need to do some things that makes me uncomfortable. And that decision is tough to make. And that's why people get the clarity but don't make changes, real meaningful changes in their lives, because it's uncomfortable.
What do you say to somebody that says, I don't know who I am anymore?
Welcome to the world where you're now ready to live not on autopilot, but as a conscious person. Because that question that they have asked themselves, or the statement that they have made that they do not know themselves anymore, is already a sign of reflection and awareness that there is something not right. And that's the beginning of a journey.
What's one thing you wish that everybody would understand about change?
One thing that everyone should understand about change is that's the only constant. As cliche that sounds, that's the truth. That's the only constant. Embrace change.